Welcome, everyone, to today's Mentorship Mike episode with Jim Prather. Jim, welcome.
Good morning.
We're excited to have you. This is a series that we have for Faith in Media, the emerging leaders effort that we have, building the next generation of faith-filled media creators. And so Jim is well known for his expertise in journalism. Kalisi Loveridge has also joined us, our student representative here. Kalisi, would you do a brief bio of Jim and his accomplishments?
Absolutely, John. Jim Prather is an award-winning digital media executive with more than 50 years of experience leading broadcast innovation, audience growth, video strategy, and digital transformation. Most recently Vice President of Digital Strategy at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, he now mentors emerging leaders, advises on digital media strategy, and remains passionate about journalism and developing the next generation of media leaders. Jim, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Looking forward to the conversation.
Jim, it's great to have you. You have been a mentor for your whole career, and so I'm excited to talk to you, especially as we have a lot of young emerging journalists listening live, but also I'm sure post-live as well. We're interested in following your journey, because you have a very interesting journey. About 16 years old, I believe you started at an AM radio station, and that may have given you the bug, right? The inkling that you wanted to get into media. Maybe share with us some of your early exploits in media.
Well, it was a journalism class in high school. My journalism teacher also worked part-time at the local radio station, and he said, I think we might have a weekend opportunity, and I'd like to introduce you to the general manager, Dale Atkins. And we had the conversation. I interviewed, and it was a small radio station, 500 watts on the AM dial, AM 1420. But they also did local news. They did local high school sports and some college play-by-play. And Dale he was my mentor in terms of developing, eventually giving me the ability to do play-by-play for high school sports. For the record, I did try at age 11 to apply to an ad in Sports Illustrated for a broadcasting school, how to do play-by-play. And I got a great letter back from the owner of the company. It says, at age 11, you do not qualify yet to be able to enter the program. However, we fully hope that when you reach the appropriate age, and I think it was 16 at the time, that, you would reach out to us again. Well, by the time I reached 16, I was on the radio and doing it firsthand and learning everything about radio at my local hometown station. I'd also point out that, where did my news fascination come from? I have to remember everybody thinks it's so tumultuous right now. Oh my goodness, there's so much dramatic news going on right now in this moment. The 60s included the Vietnam War. The 70s included the oil boycott and gas prices going up. You had assassinations of President Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy. These were tumultuous times, and journalism played a major role, whether it be with the Vietnam coverage, whether it be coverage of those major breaking news events like the Kennedy assassination. It just really took center stage. And where did you get the news? Where did you get your information? It came from the television, and it came from your local media outlet. And so, plus my dad was a fire chief of our hometown. So breaking news, well, he was retired by the time I started in radio, but, I was used to him being called in if needed as a volunteer for fires and rescues and things like that. And my mom was a nurse and working in the emergency room. So it was breaking news all the time at our house. Yeah. And they read the papers, they listened to the local radio station, they watched the national news appointment time at 5:30 in the Central Time Zone. So it's sort of all those things flowed together, and listening to play-by-play of KMOX radio in St. Louis, where they carried Cardinal baseball, and I'd have my little AM transistor radio out, and I'd listen and fall asleep listening to Cardinal baseball. And so all of that just sort of, I think, when you're in the business, you You have to have adrenaline, you have to have passion, you have to have the ability to really put yourself in situations that you might not always expect to be in. And so all of that helped fuel my passion. And so I started radio, and I thought I was going to be a radio political reporter, and I worked at local radio stations throughout my high school into my college years. And so that's helped pay my way through school. And I always took the morning shift, getting up at 4:30 in the morning and being at the station by 5:30 and being on air by 6 in the morning. And by 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., I'd then start classwork. And each of those opportunities, presented themselves and challenged me in a different way. Different radio stations, different radio formats, different coaches, different leaders. And so I graduated from college, and in a matter of graduated in college in May, married in July, and started my program for investigative journalism, public affairs reporting in the state capital of Illinois. And, starting there, I had already done political radio reporting for one of the radio networks that covered statewide politics, and they had a statewide feed. And that's where I got the bug, the political news. This is great. And I had the opportunity to cover local politicians, congressmen, and later to become U.S. Senator Paul Simon was my local congressman. And he was a journalist out of the Metro East area. And he was very encouraging. And he's the one who launched the program for public affairs reporting at what is now the University of Illinois Springfield. So again, another mentor stepped in, and he actually wrote me a letter of recommendation for the program that he helped create. And part of my job once I started the program was to be going to the classroom, but we also had a 6-month internship in the state capitol and working with, I was assigned to work at a local TV station. I was a radio guy who had never worked in TV before. And again, there's a transitional point there that happens. And as I've told a lot of the students along the way that I've been mentoring, what you're doing today absolutely won't be what you'll be doing 5, 10, 15, 30 years from now. You're going to evolve, you're going to adapt, and opportunities are going to present themselves. And so these opportunities from, working at local radio stations, doing a variety of things, to opportunity to get a master's degree in public affairs reporting, opportunity to get into TV, and 4 weeks into my internship, they hired me full-time because they had an opening. So I was both an intern, but also a full-time employee, splitting my time between the state capitol. And it was a fascinating time to be in television. In fact, two folks that helped launch CNN, Fred Hickman on the sports side, Flip Spiceland on the weather side. Both those personalities and journalistic greats moved to CNN right from Channel 20 in Springfield. And, I found myself surrounded at every point in the path of my career with exciting, interesting, dynamic folks, great mentors who coached me and sometimes cajoled me, when it didn't go perfect. They'd remind me, you can do better. But it just began a pathway for me. And nobody knows your path that you're going to follow. It's a very unique path. And, as I've talked to students, one of the things that they've said is, do you need to develop a niche immediately? I said, no, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. You need to explore. You need to challenge yourself. You need to find what drives your passion, what's in your heart, what do you like to do. And as you analyze all of that, try to begin to build a strategic plan that's going to lead you in the direction, understanding that one door may not open, but another one certainly will. And so that's been the story of my career early on, is doors kept opening for me. From there, I went to, after 3 years in Springfield, had an opportunity to go to Little Rock. And Little Rock was exciting at the time. Bill Clinton was the youngest governor, in the United States. And we had 2-year terms, and he was defeated by a Republican, Frank White, and became the youngest ex-governor ever. And it was the only election that he lost. And I was part of the coverage team on covering Bill and Hillary in Little Rock. And we had very flamboyant figures as well that I'm sure we'll talk about as we go down the path. But Little Rock was a major point in my career. It was a newsroom that was filled with future top 5 anchors, top 5 market anchors, filled with network producers, filled with people who would challenge you respectfully, and filled with newsmakers that just made covering the news exciting and dramatic. People were watching, and we were the most watched television newscast at 5 and 6 o'clock. 50% of the people at 6 o'clock that tuned in to our 6 o'clock news, 50% of the people had their TVs on in Little Rock were watching our local news. And so that was just the beginning of a very good coaching lesson for me. I had a news director, Gary Long, who really challenged me. And you can do better. You need, and with suggestions, always good suggestions and critiques. But he was a hard driver on breaking news, investigations. He cared about political news. And it was really a great laboratory surrounded by people who were going to be great in the industry for the next 40 years. I think I'll stop.
No, that's incredible. Well, maybe round it out for us in a few minutes with, because I know you went from being a reporter to a news director to VP and GM, and then I believe you ended your career as a digital strategist.
Yes.
Maybe talk us through that a little bit so we see how that kind of evolved for you over time. Just take a few minutes with that, and I'll attack this as well. Help us understand how some of your early positions helped change when you got into management roles, how you managed.
Gary Long, the news director at KARK-TV, was adamant that he felt like I could be a great news manager. And his pitch to me was, as a reporter, you can impact 1 or 2 stories a day. Yes, you can be the lead at 6 o'clock news, and you'll feel great about that. But wouldn't you like to be part of the leadership team that's building and assembling and determining what stories are going to be covered? And that's at that very early age. I think I was, 24, 25 at the time. He was saying, look, I know you want to be a reporter. I know you'd like to be weekend anchor. I know you have aspirations maybe going to DC, but I think there's an opportunity here for you, that your instincts, your ability to relate to people, both in the newsroom and in the community. And within 18 months, I had a Rolodex. That's what it's handwritten with phone numbers and pagers that you could reach people and get a hold of them. And I was beginning to get a pretty good Rolodex in Little Rock. And all of a sudden I saw that, and I embraced that vision. Don't just impact one story, impact the entire news day. And after serving in a couple of management positions in Little Rock, I had an opportunity to become news director in Corpus Christi at a very young age. I think I was like 26 and a half, 27. And they were looking for, okay, you've got Little Rock experience, you've used choppers, you've done live coverage, you've done, breaking wall to wall, help supervise breaking wall to wall weather coverage, bring that to Corpus. And T. Frank Smith owned the TV station. He was a general manager, and I learned a lot from him. And he gave me the opportunity to be a news director. And I did a couple of smaller markets along the way. One of them was KSBY TV in San Luis Obispo, California. The prettiest market I've ever worked in, as you could see the Pacific Ocean every day. But I worked for a general manager, and imagine this, San Luis Obispo was like market 125. I got a new general manager, his name's Neil Darrow. He's the former president of the CBS owned and operated television station group. And ultimately the plan was to move him to a station the company later acquired in San Diego. But he was ready to move, and he took the job, and I was his first news director in San Luis Obispo. And he taught me something that I've always stayed with me, and I preach it, that you're on the record, Jim. As a news director, people are watching you, whether you're in the restaurant, whether you're in the break room, whether you're out in the community, whether you're mowing the grass. People know who you are and what kind of role that you have. And you have to understand that people are going to listen to what you say. So if you're a news director and you're telling a reporter and giving them feedback, and you have to give them some tough advice. Don't be in the restaurant yucking it up with them, because they'll get mixed versions of what you're trying to be. And you are the news director 24/7 for this television station, and you need to be ready. And this is amplified in today's environment on social media. One of the coaching points that I give young reporters is, you're on the record. So you better scrub your social media of all these, what you think are attractive photos or goofy photos or fun photos. You're now a journalist, and people are going to be looking, and especially if you're publicizing, this is my social media feed, they're going to be watching you on Instagram. They're going to be watching what you push out on YouTube. They're going to be looking, are you going to like? What channels are you subscribing to? Who are you following? Are you doing any commentary? And as a journalist, you have to play it down the middle. And you cannot, and really, we had a social media policy at the Las Vegas Review-Journal that I thought was just excellent, that demanded that, as a reporter or an employee of the newsroom, you were held to a different standard on your social media. And that's one of the messages that I've shared with those reporters, future reporters, producers, news directors. From St. Louis Obispo, I did an intercompany transfer, went to Baltimore, Maryland as assistant news director, market 125 to market 2022 in Baltimore, Maryland, 100 market sizes bigger. And it was there that I carry this with me. What's the spirit of the day and what's the spirit of the community? Gary Wardlaw was my news director, and he always spoke about spirit of the day. What are people feeling like today? Orioles won. They've got a 12-game winning streak. It might influence, okay, we might lead with the Orioles because, it's what everybody's talking about in the community. And it's a positive, feel-good story. Or it might be there's a major decision coming down in terms of what's happening with the development on Chesapeake Bay and how is that going to impact the economy. And certainly Baltimore was a major breaking news city as well. Homicide, the series that NBC put on in the 90s, was based on Baltimore. And there were a lot of homicides in that city. And you had to understand where the crime was happening. Could you actually send a crew into that area? There were contexts that you needed to have, and I had veteran reporters and producers that knew the market better than I did, and they would counsel me. Jim, we don't want to go in there. I know you're assistant news director, you make that call, but this is a tough neighborhood, and you need to understand this. You need to know the market. So from there in Baltimore, I was the assistant news director, and in a couple of years, I had the opportunity to become news director to WTMJ in Milwaukee. And on my very first day on the job, that night, Jeffrey Dahmer got arrested. I don't know anybody's name in the newsroom. I don't know the technology. I don't know what our capabilities are. It was a fascinating time, and I had to lean into my news managers and the existing team to help guide me. But I knew we needed to be very aggressive in covering the story and telling that story as it unfolded. And it took months to unfold. And when you have events like that, they teach you things that you would not even think about, that you need to have a plan. You need to have an action plan, not just in the moment, but have a pre-established action plan that guides reporting, guides content coverage, and who goes where and does what. News director, after 3.5, 4 years, became general manager and then helped guide the station, learned more about marketing. I had great resource in Jim Thomas, our vice president for marketing, as an ally there, and we built campaigns that really connected to the community. And we went from third place to first place in late news, and we seized every opportunity that was given to us. We looked at the research. We looked at Nielsen Analytics, minute by minute. We did our research and analysis and kept not just one strategic plan, but an evolving strategic plan based on how the audience was reacting to our marketing, reacting to our content, reacting to the topicals, reacting to, the tone and approach, the anchor talent, all of that. So great learning lesson there. Later became part of the corporate team, supervising our television stations and some radio stations along the way. And after about 12 years, I just felt in my heart that there was an opportunity in Las Vegas. When I looked at Milwaukee and Las Vegas, we own the ABC affiliate in Vegas. I looked at that and I said, Vegas will eventually become a bigger market revenue-wise than Milwaukee. Milwaukee wasn't growing. And, we went from Vegas when we bought the TV station, Journal, prior to me coming on board, bought it, I want to say, in 1979, 1980, and it was in the hundreds. Today, it's a top 40 market, and revenue rank usually exceeds that and puts it in the 30s in terms of revenue. And meanwhile, Milwaukee is stabilized, and it's still a top 30 market, but it's not growing as fast. And so I made the decision. I talked to my corporate team. I said, I feel like we've got stations in Boise. We've got stations in Tucson. We've got stations in Palm Springs. I think there's an opportunity to have leadership on the West Coast, and I can quickly get to those markets rather than flying out of Milwaukee. And we needed to turn Channel 13 around too. So it became a case of how do you do that? And we took some of what we learned in Milwaukee and applied that to Las Vegas. It resulted in ratings improvement, better content, better marketing, and the brand image of the station grew as we began to repair the television station. And as general manager and a corporate leader, Journal sold and merged with Scripps, and I helped the transition through Scripps. And I just felt like in the year end of 2016, it was all about the smartphone. It was all about digital, and the television just wasn't adapting very quickly to what has now become the reality here in 2026, 10 years later, that smartphone now is a bigger piece of the equation than the big television screen. And everybody used to get their news from the big screen. No, it's all about the little screen, and it's about social media. It's about news on demand that can come at you as quickly as you want to absorb it. And when the Adelson family purchased the Las Vegas Review-Journal, it created an opportunity that I pursued and became a consultant, and later became executive director of programming, and then later vice president of digital strategy. And, that sums it up. Just everywhere I went, I absorbed, I learned, I analyzed. There was a method to my madness. I didn't know Baltimore. I had to learn Baltimore very quickly. I didn't know Milwaukee, but they were similar kind of markets to some extent. And I would take lessons learned in Baltimore to help advance our breaking news coverage in Milwaukee. I would take what I learned in Milwaukee and apply it to Vegas in small increments. Vegas is a very blue-collar market. Vegas is 40 million visitors. It outplays the market size in terms of what can happen inside this market and what does happen every day in this market. And what people care about what's happening in Vegas, whether they live in New York City, Dallas, Texas, or San Francisco, what happens in Vegas does interest a lot of those people because we're a destination location.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great thoughts there, and thank you for walking us through your career journey. I'd be remiss, Jim, if I didn't ask about the intersection of faith and media. Share with us what you will about how your faith traditions, whether they're, principles that you adhere to or something like that, that has guided or influenced you moving, in your career as you transition from point to point, as you were asked to do different things and different responsibilities within each station or location you were at. Help us understand that.
A couple of basic brand items that are in my brand on that. Trust God, read the Bible, understand that you're not perfect and you're going to fail. And there are times whether it's in your career path or covering a story or a disappointing third quarter report card for your television station, that you need things that support you and guide you. And my wife and I always prayed before we made decisions to move and big decisions and seek God's guidance. And it was also, my mom really impressed upon me, you can't outgive God. And that's why I do what I do. I've got 50 years experience now, plus some good decisions, some bad decisions, but I've always learned. I have 50 years of experience that I can share. And it's not that you have to do what I what I recommend when I'm mentoring people, I give them a variety of different options. You have to do what's good for you. You have to do what's right for you. Have you prayed about this? Have you thought about this? Have you reflected back on this? And in journalism, when I started, was all about community service. And I do think that God inspired me to, pursue this career to help make people aware and help deliver news to them, from the big breaking news stories, but to the local neighborhood stories. And I'll give you an example. When I was in Milwaukee, and we did this as well in Vegas, we would take a look at some of the larger churches in our city, in our community, and my staff would look at me, why are we doing a series on some of the largest churches in our city of different faiths? And I said, people are going there, they're going to church. It's another point for us to connect with our audience. And you're going to find the resources there that exist within some of those churches and some of the contacts that we're going to create, that when there's a devastating situation that happens in your community, some of these faith leaders are going to be some of the first to step out and say, we're here to support, whether that's, fundraising, whether that's, gathering supplies to help support families in need, whether it's come to the church, gather here. This is a safe place for you to come. And it also is also proving, and I've always felt like, you need to show evidence that you're showing a variety of sides. Everybody talks about the two sides of the story. There's so many different angles and sides to these stories. And you need to analyze, and sometimes you're going to learn something because there are different opinions, even within the different churches. The African American church that is in one of the most challenging zip codes in Las Vegas is going to have a much different point of view in terms of daily life and how things are happening in their community versus one that's in a suburban community that they're simply not going to have the same challenges. But what they do have is a point of view of serving their specific communities and across multiple layers. And finally, I would say is that, when you reflect and you look back, every journalist is going to face a time when they question, man, am I doing this? Is this the right thing for me to do? And that's when I always go to the outside counsel. I pray about it. I seek guidance. I search out certain sections of the Bible that can help me. Proverbs and Psalms and James have guided me through more decision making than I could ever say. And I also participated when I was at general manager level. I actively participated in my own church, fundraising we built schools. Lutherans are well known for building schools, and we did it in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. Now we're in stage 3 here in building schools in Las Vegas Elementary. We've got a high school and junior high, and remaining active there. And you know what? There are Lutheran kids who attend those schools. The waiting lists are long, but 80% of those kids attending those schools are not Lutheran. They just want to have a Christian foundation of a education that can guide you and help you understand the world that you're living in and be able to adapt.
Well said, Jim. Thank you. Great thoughts. Let's transition now into some of our micro musings, right? This is our quick call and response, where I'll just ask you some questions and give me a quick 10 to 15 second answer based on what your thoughts are. Radio or television?
Television.
Okay. Tell us why.
Just the impact. It's the impact of video, the impact of being able to sustain and deliver news that people can see and be an eyewitness watching in front of their television.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Market size, big or small?
Big. You have more toys to play with.
Yeah.
Choppers. You also have a different level of experience, and that doesn't mean not small, because you have to start small and grow into that bigger market. But the experience level and being able to do some of the things that are expected of, top 40 television today, you need experience.
Yeah. Okay. 2 final questions, then we'll transition to Kalisi for some student and those that are watching questions that she had. 1 word Jim, that describes your leadership style?
Strategic.
Love that. And I've seen that as you've mentored some students. Thank you. That's great. Tell us briefly a newsroom moment that changed how you see local journalism.
I'm going to use a positive one. We were covering in Milwaukee as general manager of the television station, the NBC affiliate, and I was building a relationship with the Green Bay Packers. For those who are sports aficionados, Brett Favre, Reggie White were on the team. It was a team that in 1996-97 won the Super Bowl. And strategically, I'd been building a relationship with the Packers, and I said, I know you don't want to talk about it, but I know you're going to the Super Bowl. And not only do I know you're going to the Super Bowl, I know you're going to win it. And we created with no one else in the market realizing what we were doing, we created an event called Return to Titletown. When the Packers landed a couple of days after the Super Bowl win in New Orleans, I had 4 stations in Wisconsin, plus stations in Nebraska. I'm trying to think if there was any in Minnesota, but we had a couple of states coverage with wall-to-wall coverage of the Green Bay Packers stepping off the plane. Now, you have to understand, it's Green Bay, Wisconsin, wind chills -10 when we start.
Yeah.
There's ice, snow on the roads. They put the team on open buses. They're freezing. And there are hundreds of thousands of people in downtown Green Bay that prevent them from moving as quickly as they had planned. So it became, we thought we were going to have like a 90-minute event. Okay, when we covered the parade, well, everybody covered the parade. But I had signed a deal with the Green Bay Packers, had convinced them that we could deliver. We created an event where they ended their journey inside Lambeau Field. And Reggie White and the Green Bay Packers and the Super Bowl champions walked through there. But you have to understand, the fans had been there for several hours in -20 wind chill, and they stayed. No one left. They wanted to see the event. And we had team coverage from the broadcast booth on the field, and we were vamping, showing all these pictures and the coverage. We didn't own a chopper at the time, but, we were innovative in terms of how we could get wide shots and really, get the scope of the scene. And it goes back to strategy.
Yeah,
The
beautiful.
local television stations were saying, we're going to carry this anyway. I said, if you do, we will sue you, and the Green Bay Packers are going to sue you, and good luck with that. But more importantly, we did something that had never been done before, to my knowledge. An exclusive event that statewide, everybody got to see our brand and our team, and we shared resources, and it was just simply a phenomenal feeling at the end of the day that we could help share this magic moment with our audience.
Incredible. So tying the station to the Packers and celebrating together. I love that. Great example. Well, Kalisi, let's turn some time over to you and student and audience questions, shall we?
Wonderful. Thank you, John. We've got a couple of student questions rolling in. And the first one is from Darnell. Jim, what's something you got wrong early on in your career that actually helped you later and make you a better media digital strategist?
There's a couple of them that I would point to. Never leave the scene of the story too early, whether that's at the city council or there's breaking news situation and cops aren't talking a lot. You have to stay and you have to talk to people in the neighborhood. You have to talk to folks that are in the audience. And that doesn't mean you can't do your story. You've got your computer with you, you file your story, but never leave the story too early because people may have video. They may come up to you and approach you and say, hey, I know you might not be interested, but I do have a little bit of video here. You want to see it? And a lot of times I see young reporters and as an assignment editor, I thought I could switch out crews on a major breaking situation on the border of Arkansas and Nevada. And it was a major breaking news situation that the FBI was raiding a compound. And of course they chose to do the raid while my crews weren't completely in place. So never leave the scene. Always look for, does anybody have any information? Does anybody have any video? What are things that the other reporters, okay, I've done my thing, now I got to go to my next story. Look for that. And that's very helpful. Another thing is read your analytics and understand your analytics. As a young, if a story you publish gets 15,000 page views, what was it that drove 15,000 people to read your story? Was it the headline? Was it the story? Was it social media marketing? Was it the content itself? And then if 15,000 people read that story, is there a follow-up you can do to move that story forward that, again, people will want to read about? And if you're in the business long enough and you're doing your job as a reporter or an editor and you're looking at things, you have to look at the analytics and you have to say, what's driving people to read? What's driving people to come to the television set and stay on to watch this coverage or this story? And a lot of times when you're young in your career, well, yeah, that's great, but I'm on to my next story. Well, sometimes your next best story is going to be a follow-up or a theme of stories related to what you just did.
Thank you so much. We've got a question from Kaylani. You mentioned there was a method to your madness when learning new places and markets. Do you have any tips for learning and adapting quickly?
Yes, I do. Do your research on the market before you ever get there and start work. Take a look at the news websites, review what the TV stations are doing. Is there any radio in the market? Listen to talk radio on both sides. If there's talk radio, you need to learn the market as quickly as possible. Sign up for e-alerts for everybody in the market that does them so that you're quickly assimilating what's happening in your market. You may be the education reporter, but they're doing breaking news alerts on what the school board is doing, or there's too many kids in a classroom, or there's not enough air conditioning and they're shutting schools down. You need to see what the competition's doing and do that even before you start your job. Then do your analytics work. What's the demographic makeup of the brand that you're working for? Who is their audience? Is it tailored towards mostly suburban, highly educated? Is a more blue-collar brand? You need to know who you're writing for, who you're representing, and the kind of stories that are going to resonate with that audience. And then you really need to take a look and go into the market and ask a lot of questions. Listening is your biggest advantage when you go and start a new job. That talk to the reporters that have been there a year, 5 years, the editors, when you're going to church. Hey, what do you think of that story? You got any feedback? Whether you're at church or whether you're at a social event, people love to talk about their opinions on the news, their take on the news. And finally, I will say is do not be disappointed when you get ripped on social media, okay? It's part of the job description these days. And expect that it's going to happen. And you have to look at it and judge it through an accuracy lens. Were they accurate here? Did I miss something? Was there an angle here that I could have pursued? Or did I cover the story with the time that I had, with the amount of time they gave me to cover that story? Read those comments because that can also drive you to your next stage of that story development, because people post things, well, you didn't know this, but bam, 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 bam. Now I've got a new angle on this story that I can pursue. But listening to the market, because if people have been there, they want to share their opinions about news coverage.
Thank you so much. John, do we have room for one more question?
Yeah, let's do one last quick one, shall we?
All right. This question is from Spencer. He asks, looking back, is there a specific instance where God helped you reach a specific person or community through your work in media?
1 October, Las Vegas. It was a crushing time for our city. We had to respond as news people, but also as human beings to the coverage of that story. And many of the people in the newsroom had friends who were there, had acquaintances who were there. And it's what you have to do is, when evil like that happens, it lives in our world. It's going to happen. But you have to turn to God. You have to turn to your faith to understand that everything that we talk about, the peace, the eternal peace of Jesus Christ, will guide you through these most tragic moments, but also inspire you to follow the story and tell the story. And one of the examples that my team worked very hard on, we created, it was 56 at the time, 56 video biographies so that every person had a story. And we could do that and put that on video so that they would not only be remembered as a victim of that tragic event, but they were a real person and being able to share their story and their background. We felt like was sharing with people, okay, there is light here. these were some amazing people with interesting personalities, and just learn about them and being able to share that light with them in that process. And certainly leaning into, whether it's a Vegas Golden Knights, embracing it and helping show up at blood drives, whether it was churches saying, look, we want to help support, we're going to do prayer, vigil, all of that, helps form a community and build around.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, for our youngest demographic, maybe just give a 30-second overview of that incident, the mass shooting.
Mass shooting, top of Mandalay Bay, a gunman armed with multiple guns and a ton of ammunition broke out a window of Mandalay Bay and rained down bullets onto a Jason Aldean concert that killed. Later, it became 58 because some died months, even a year later. And it happened at a music festival across the street from Mandalay Bay. It was open, and it was a Sunday night at 10 o'clock around that time. And it really changed the city in the moment, but also, I think we now realize that, tragic things like this, it was one of the worst mass shootings to ever happen. And it happened in our town. And that hurt just those who live here and call this place home. How could a gunman do this? And he did, but I think the way the city's responded, the way the community's responded, the way Metro has responded to planning for future events and avoiding these kinds of things has really made us a better city.
I would agree. Well, Jim, we are closing in on the finish line for you, but I want to give you 4 or 5 minutes, whatever you need and whatever you would like to take to fill in whatever gaps we've got. I know we haven't covered everything sufficiently, but if you were speaking to a group of young people in their early 20s entering the media business that you have been in now for multiple decades, what are some of the key things that you would recommend to them? What do they need to know?
You have to adapt. And my generation of journalists that I've worked with has not always adapted as quickly as they should have. What do today's journalists have to do? We talked about social media. You have to understand that some of the best ways to connect to your audience and to grow your audience is to gain followers, to gain likes to the content that you're posting. And it's not just, okay, here's a photo and a link to my story. If you have a really interesting photo story, build a mini library of 3, 4, 5 photos, a gallery that can get them engaged and jump into the story. And, as you're working through this, you have to understand that, you have to do video. Okay. We talk about multimedia journalists. The days of print alone, at least in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, I think where it is today in most newsrooms, expect you on a breaking news situation, if a photographer is not available, shoot photo, shoot video, get the story. And then also be able to edit social media, edit stories, and continue to understand that the story never ends. I think a lot of people think, okay, well, I filed my story. I can go home now. But if it's a developing story, things can happen 3 or 4 hours later that change that storyline. And you've got to be ready to adapt and jump in and say, that's my story. I'm going to update it. There's new information that changes the headline and changes the lead of the story. And, this adaptability, people want to always put themselves in a self-contained quarantine, I think sometimes. That, look, this is what I do and this is my niche. And especially for young journalists, your niche can really confine you. You don't know sometimes what you love to do. I didn't know that when I started thinking about news management, it was going to take me down the path that it did. But, you have to be adaptable. You have to also take feedback constructively. That whether it's on social media, and sometimes you just got to say, look, can't change it. That's the way people think. It was a good story. I'm standing by it and I'm moving on. But whether it's your colleagues, whether it's your, some of your readers, you need to be able to, you've got an angle on this story I might not have thought of. And reporting, here's one of the things I see with young journalists. At times they're afraid to reach out. They're afraid to reach out. And one of my suggestions is this, that you want to learn more about the job you want to do, call some of the people that are doing it, reach out to them by email, get them on social media. A lot of these veteran journalists will take the time, if you're sincere and polite about it, will take the time to coach you and give you, this is my experience, this is what I learned. And, and that's important. I see, I see today's generation, they're hesitant to reach out. Sometimes, I'll give you an example. I'm 16 years old, the disc jockey of the #1 rated rock and roll station, AM Top 40 station in St. Louis, came to my high school. I went up to him. I introduced myself. I'm on the local radio station. He took me out to lunch, and it began and he later invited me, and I was able to visit his radio station. If you don't take the time and energy and effort to reach out to those who want to help you and coach you and give you their advice, because a lot of these journalists and a lot of these folks in the media are willing to share, but you have to have the courage to be able to step out, pick up the phone, or text them or reach them in a way. And the other thing is I see a fear of going out into the field, and I'm not sure what drives this. And I did the story. Here's a press release, and I made some phone calls. Did you go to City Hall? Did you hang around the mayor's office? Did you heard about that garbage dump that's on fire? Okay, I know you wrote the press release, but that's a pretty big fire. I think you should go down there and see what's going on. And you need to not be tethered to the newsroom. The news is not happening in the newsroom. It's happening in your community. Beautiful. And I would say be prepared for failure. And I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but they usually led to me learning something that, if you learn and don't repeat, can be powerful. Or at least it will make you pause. Do I really want to do that? Is that really the right way to approach that interview? And I got shut down. They thought whatever seems to be in your way, whether it's you apply for a job and you don't get the job. Well, there's lots of jobs. Let's go. There's more doors to be opened. And take the critique and feedback. And always, if you can, try to say, okay, what did I miss? Where did I miss? Was there anything specific? I tried to do that when I did some interviews. As I was going through my career, what were some things that were triggers for you that maybe I should be aware of in terms of how I approach, how I talk? Am I talking too fast? Am I not being focused enough? And in the case of maybe this podcast, maybe talking too much. But the reality is you will find that you'll learn more from failure than any success that you have. And it will drive you. It will sustain you. It will, you make mistakes, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. I've learned my lesson. We're now going to try this. And that may not work either. But never stop. Never stop pursuing your passion and the path that you've chosen to take. And a lot of people will give you advice and say, well, maybe you should try this. Listen to them, but also understand what's in your heart and what you want to do and build that out. So that would be sometimes failure is the best solution to success, because it humbles you and it brings you back down to earth and reminds you you're not perfect and you can move forward.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've heard it often said, fail fast and fail forward, right? You learn as you lean forward and stay the course. So, Jim Prather, thank you so much. It's evident to me you're a great mentor, you're a great journalist, great strategist, a man of faith, and we sure appreciate having you on today. Thank you for taking some time with us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. We will see you next time on our next episode of Mentorship Mike. Until then, feel free to listen to the other episodes that we have available on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much.